Hey everyone, so I am back in our home office, or as I like to call it, my library. And you can only see a portion of the books, but you can obviously see I need more bookshelf space. Either that or I got to start putting some of my old books into some boxes and store them because I just don't like to get rid of my books. And speaking of old books, I remembered a particular book that was really fun to read, not only for me, but also for our family. And I don't know if any of you were big Harry Potter fans, but I know our family was. I know some people had some trouble with the Harry Potter themes, but you know what? I found some really amazing, cool themes in that book and in that series of books. And I just love the series. And we used to listen to them in the car when we would drive places with our families when we'd be on vacation. We had almost every one of the books on CD. In fact, when the first book came out, I was the first one in our family to read the book. I got it because I saw a review on it and they talked about how cool this kid's book was, and I got it. And I remember one day I was sitting there reading it and our daughter came up to me and she goes, "Oh my gosh, you're reading Harry Potter?" And I said, "Yeah, I didn't realize that I was cool," because that's what the cool kids were reading at school. Anyway, so here's how this whole idea came about. I had been doing some studying and I was reading on Paul and I was reading this particular part about Paul and things that he was struggling with. And as I was reading this, I recalled a story or a part of the story in the very first book, The Sorcerer's Stone, that happens right towards the end of the book. And if you don't know the stories, Harry Potter and his two good friends, Ron and Hermione, are always in these big adventures and they're trying to battle the bad guy, Voldemort. And in this first book, we're just kind of being introduced to that. And at one part of the book, towards the end of the book, they're trying to find the Sorcerer's Stone before the bad guy can get him. And they're going through this spot in the castle, their school, and they're trying to make it to this hidden level within the school. And as they're doing this, they fall down this trap door. And as they fall down this trap door, they're grabbed by this really scary vine. And this vine just encapsulates them and grabs a hold of them and holds them tight. In fact, the more they try to get out, the harder they fight this, the tighter this vine gets around them. It starts restricting on them and they're starting to get hard for them to breathe. Well, Hermione, who is probably the smartest one of the bunch, she says to the other two, "I know what this is. You have to relax. You have to stop trying to fight it. You have to let go and relax, because this is called the Devil's Snare." I thought it was an interesting name that they gave him in this book, and it actually tied in a little bit with what I've been reading about Paul. Anyway, so the Devil's Snare, it had them, and Hermione says, "You've got to relax, you've got to let go, you've got to trust, and just don't fight it anymore." And then she starts doing that, and sure enough, the vines around her begin to loosen and she falls through. Well, Ron and Harry, they're not sure they want to do this. It's so counterintuitive. I mean, when you're in a difficult place and you're struggling with something, you want to be strong and you want to be able to fight your way through. But they finally trust what Hermione says and they relax and they too fall through. They're saved because they stopped fighting it and they relaxed. And in that moment, they found true strength. Okay, so how does this connect? The Apostle Paul had started a church in Corinth, and this church was a very important church for him, but it was also a very difficult church. The church had so many divisions in it. In fact, after Paul had started this church, he left for a while and other teachers came in, and some of them felt like they were in conflict with Paul, and this church became so dysfunctional with the divisions it had. And sometimes there were some groups of people that actually spoke so strongly against Paul that he felt he had to continually defend himself and defend his ministry while he was among them. And at one point in the story, Paul is so broken up by what's going on there because they're attacking him. And one of the things that they attack him on is basically this idea that, Paul, if you really truly were preaching the right gospel, if you were truly living as Jesus wants you to live, you wouldn't have all these problems and these struggles that you seem to be having. And Paul said, no, it's absolutely the opposite. It's absolutely the opposite. And in chapter 12 of the second letter to the Corinthian church, Paul begins to talk about this person who had had this great and wonderful vision. And as he talks about this great vision that this person had, some scholars think he was actually talking about himself, but he's talking as if it was somebody else. He talks about this great vision they has, but then he says this in verse 5. On behalf of such a one I will boast, but on my own behalf I will not boast except of my weaknesses. But if I wish to boast, I will not be a fool, for I will be speaking the truth. But I refrain from it, so that no one may think better of me than what is seen in me or heard from me, even considering the exceptional character of the revelations. And he's talking about, look, I've had these great revelations, I've had these great experiences, but if you really want me to boast, the only thing I will boast in is my weakness. And then he explains why. He says, therefore, to keep me from being elated, a thorn was given to me in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me, kind of like that devil's snare that held him tight, to keep me from being too elated. 3 times, he says, I appealed to the Lord about this so that it would leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. And then he goes on to say, so I will boast all the more gladly of my weakness, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Therefore, I am content with weakness, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities for the sake of Christ. For whenever I am weak, then I am strong. You see, Paul learned that if he was going to make it, it wasn't going to be on his own power. And he learned that when he was really struggling and things were constricting in on him and he was facing real hardships, what he needed to do was stop fighting it and let go and simply trust that the power of God was going to reign in him. And that's what Paul learned. He learned that his true strengths were in recognizing his weaknesses and knowing that God was going to pull him through in those times of weakness. Now, without a doubt, you and I are going to experience weakness. We're going to have struggles. We're going to have hard times. But when we do, is the answer to try to fight harder, to do better, or is the answer maybe to simply wait for God to give you that kind of strength that you need? That was a lesson Paul seemed to learn, and it was a lesson he wanted the church in Corinth to learn. And because it's written for us, perhaps it's the lesson that we need to learn. Thanks so much.